My name is Sergeant Medlin. I was the JFO or Joint Fires Observer for 2nd Platoon, and I control mortars, artillery, and airstrikes. What we'd like to talk about today is an operation that we did in 2011, Afghanistan. We were in RC East. We had to escort engineers from this super fob. It was a brand new super fob, and they were going to repair a dirt road that went due north up to this Polish company outpost. And this outpost was literally in the fucking middle of nowhere. So I'm guessing it just got to be too expensive to fly everything out to them. So they wanted to repair this dirt road to drive everything out to them. Now, it was a 3-day operation. I don't want to talk about the first day because that is a monster all in itself. I want to focus on the second and the third day because I think that's the juiciest. Don't get me wrong, all 3 days were fucking crazy, but I want to focus on the firefight we had the second and the third day because I thought they were probably the craziest I've ever been in. So to start off, I want to talk about where we were. We were at Kop Bandasarde, which was right next to a dam. And I'm on Google Earth, so bear with me here. Anyway, we would get on this road here. This was a normal route we took, which was southeast all the way down to Fob Sharana. And Fob Sharana is where we got like all of our big supplies. Anytime any major maintenance that needed to be done, vehicles would go down there. And that's where we first flew in. There's a major airport right here, Fob Sharana. And they've got like a huge like PX, and that's where I got all my monsters and shit. Anyway, in the town of Sharana right here, Sharan, we took a hard right and we went, I don't know, it was like 3 or 4 hour drive all the way southwest. Where's it at? There we go. Okay. The town of Shergan Shar. It's another fucked up name that I'm pretty sure I'm butchering. Anyway, this is where the super fob was at, and I know this because of the map that Lieutenant Harold gave me. This was what we discussed with the engineers, and if you look down here, the town of Shergun Shakar. That's where we started. And if you see, we started going up north. If you zoom in right here, it says no road question mark. I'm guessing that was like the big concern the engineers had, and I know they did a lot of work right there, but I don't think the road was completely gone like that. I don't remember that. Anyway, so the first day we had some crazy shit going on, but like I said, we'll talk about that on another time. The second day, we make it up to this town of Chambaran, and you can see the red arrow here. As we were coming north, we started taking contact from this village. And I remember when it first started off, all the boomerang systems were going off, and there was a lot of confusion about like what direction and where everything was coming from. So there was a lot of confusion at first, but I wanted to talk about this because I think it has a badass little tale about Helm. And Helm was our gunner. We had the Mark 19, and anybody that's fucked with the Mark 19, like when you're trying to get that thing up and running, it's not like your M4 or the 240 where you just use your fingers and your hands. When you're trying to get this Mark 19 going, you're using both of your arms, all of your body weight. You're using the momentum to try and like get this thing going. And I remember when we were taking contact, we're trying to pinpoint where it was coming from, and I remember Lieutenant Harold yelling up to Helm, it's like, get that fucking Mark 19 going. And Helm was up there like fighting tooth and nail with this thing, trying to get it going. and I start hearing whizzing going over the turret. It was an open turret, so you could hear like whizzing. And then all of a sudden, I started hearing rounds hitting the turret. They were pinging off big time. And I remember I looked up expecting to see Helm ducking. He wasn't ducking. He was still standing up, fighting with the Mark 19, getting this motherfucker up. And I got goosebumps right now just remembering this. I mean, what a bad motherfucker. Once he got it up and running, he cut loose with this burst. I was like, fuck yeah. And I remember we got online, and Lieutenant Harrell was like, all right, everybody dismount. So we get out of the vehicle, and I remember Kern came up to me, and we were standing there. I don't remember what, I think Lieutenant Harrell was telling us, like he always does, you know, hey, look, don't fire on any innocent civilians, or don't do anything that, you know, create any unnecessary collateral damage. Find your targets, use your mortars. And we went out into the front of the vehicle, and I don't remember what we were talking about, but Helm let go of another burst right over our heads. We were right in front of the vehicle, and it scared the living shit out of all of us. We all we all jumped, and then we laughed, and then that was kind of a slap in the face. It's like, hey man, fucking get your shit together. So the vehicles couldn't go any further because there was this ditch, and it went down into like a little tiny culvert or something. It went down a little bit, and then there was this ditch. The vehicles could not go over it. So that's the reason why we dismounted. And I remember we jumped over the little canal, and Kern dropped his bag, pulled the mortar out. I dropped my bag, pulled my vectors out, and I just remember all the firing going like all around us and around our heads, and you can just hear all the whizzing and everything, and RPGs were going. And we were taking contact from a lot of different positions, but there is one in particular if you look at this, when we dismounted, facing the village, there was a machine gun on the far left, and it was in this tree line. And I could see the tracers coming. Kern was firing a little bit more to the right, so I remember telling him, hey, shift left, shift left. And the way that I would just tell Kern how to engage a target is, one, I would give him an accurate distance with the vectors, and then I would put my arm over his head and use my hand to kind of guide him to whatever target that I was at. And maybe people know this, maybe people don't, but Kern was a fucking sniper with that mortar tube. As long as I gave him an accurate distance and I walked him onto the target, he hit everything that I told him to. And this machine gun nest, which was to the far left in this tree line, I gave him one adjustment, we shifted left, and I told him to add 50, which is 50 meters. That round launched, I'm watching, and I can see the tracers coming, direct hit. It could not have been more perfect hit, right on top of that machine gun nest. Now I'm guessing they had maybe 2 to 4 people there. I don't know. I couldn't see actual people. I'm sure they were laying in the prone, but we killed that machine gun. All the fighting, all the shooting stopped after we hit that thing. And then once that machine gun got killed, they started pushing north. And as we were looking at the village, they would be kind of pushing to the right, but they were pushing north. I know there was a lot of different fighting positions. I think looking back on it now, I think they were just, doing what they could while they were kind of pushing more to the north side of the village. And man, I think we fired 28 mortars in that firefight. A lot of people don't know this, but Kern burned the glove off his hand because the tube was so hot. And I know we killed a lot of motherfuckers that day. And as they're pushing north, they set up on the far side, and an F-16 checked on station. So I did a target talk on, and he spotted him. He told me he could see there was a big group of them, and they were running around all over the place. but he couldn't drop because of collateral damage. You can't drop a 500 or 1,000 pound bomb inside of a village. And as I'm talking to the pilot, I could hear Sergeant Doty yell, "Hey, tell him to drop a 500 pounder." And he starts laughing. And I was like, oh shit, that's Sergeant Doty. And I remember I looked over to the left, and there was Sergeant Doty and all his guys all spread out along to the left side. And I was like, holy fuck, when did they get here? You know? And it's funny because I had that much tunnel vision. I was so focused on what I was doing. I had no idea that Sergeant Doty and them had all lined up there. And in actuality, they were probably the first ones there. But because I was so tunnel vision, which I think a lot of us can get when you're really into something, like everything else is just, you're not paying attention. And I remember talking to Stemp, and he showed me a quick video he had of they pushed off further to the left to launch an AT-4. The AT-4 ended up being a dud from what I remember. But I had no idea. Holgain says that he remembers seeing like bullets flying and dirt kicking up all around me, and I was like, I honestly don't remember. I was so engaged, and I remember I was terrified because everybody else was laying down. I had to stand up behind Kern to spot these rounds and to give them adjustments. And the whole time, every time I kept standing up, I was like, I was waiting to get shot in the mouth. That was probably the first time I was actually terrified. And I just was waiting for it. I just kept thinking I was going to get shot in the mouth. And anyways, so back to the story. The pilot calls and says, hey, I can't drop. I'm running low on fuel. He said he was bingo, which means he has to leave for fuel. So he said, I followed him into a tree line. Here's the grid. They're set up in an ambush. I can see all their weapons pointing at you. They're waiting for you. And then he left. And I went back and told Lieutenant Harrell, I gave him the grid. I told him what the pilot had told me. And when I told Lieutenant Harrell, I think that was the first time it hit me. I was like, these motherfuckers just fought us for however long. I've heard the fight was 2 hours. I've heard it was 3 hours. I've heard it was an hour and a half. I've heard all kinds of things. I personally think it was about 2 hours long, but I just don't remember. But for these guys to fight like that and then to maneuver on us and set up an ambush, I was like, this shit is fucking real. So back to Google Earth. They set up this ambush right there. That was the grid. And we were down here by where it says Giro firefight. Lieutenant Harrell looked at it on the Blue Force tracker and he pointed and he said, oh, it's over there to the right, up to the north. So he tells everybody to mount up and we push as close as we can get. And we set up a little circular vehicle patrol base. And by this time, it's starting to get dark. And I remember we got out of the vehicle. Lieutenant Harrell was there. A bunch of people were there. And they were calling on the radio for people to come because we were going to run across this open field to assault this tree line. And I remember thinking, after everything that just happened and we just fought all this time, now we're fixing to run across an open field with them waiting for us. And I was like, people are going to die. We're going to get fucked up. And I told Lieutenant Harrell that, and I said, there is no cover anywhere. And he kind of pointed over to where this, he said it was a ditch. It was about fucking 6 inches deep. There's no fucking cover in there. But I wasn't going to say anything like, oh, we can't do this, but that's what I was thinking, man. I mean, I'll be honest. I was like, we're going to get fucked up. And as we were standing there, Duffy walks up, and right when he gets in front of me, he fucking NDs and shoots like right in between. It was right by my foot. He starts laughing. I start laughing. Lieutenant Harrell shook his head and kind of walked off, and I was like, well, that wasn't good. They definitely know we're outside now. And I remember we were waiting. It was dark. I have all this anxiety. I'm like, fuck, man, I know I'm the slowest one because I'm carrying all this weight. I was like, this is going to be bad. And I had all this anxiety, and we're sitting here waiting. After a conversation with a few other people. I think it was Scott Nicky and a couple others that we were waiting on. And as we were waiting, I start to see headlights off in the distance. And I was like, motherfucking Polish. So I kind of walked over. I was like, hey, Lieutenant Harold. I said, hey, sir, I can see headlights off in the distance, man. The Polish are about to get here. And he's like, all right, everybody mount back up. So a majority of us mounted back up. There were still a few of us that were outside. And the Polish show up in these BMPs. And they come like right in the middle of our vehicle patrol base. And I think two of them, if I remember correctly, there was two BMPs that just opened up in between two or three of our vehicles. I think Doty was one of them. And they opened up on that tree line and just annihilated that whole area. And come to find out, the Polish told us every time they even go near this village, they just dump whatever they have into the village. And they just kind of shoot, don't even ask any questions. And I remember hearing Sergeant Doty screaming over the radio that they were firing in between the vehicles. And I was like, man, these fucking Polish are crazy. Anyway, so the Polish come up. They freaking annihilate the tree line. We all mount back up. And then they lead us back to the Polish cop. And I remember when we got to the cop, I think we asked for resupply because we were pretty black on ammo. I know we fired all the mortar rounds, and a lot of us were pretty black on ammo. I don't think they had any of our ammo. And I remember somebody saying that Lieutenant Harold had talked to them and said, well, can you at least escort us past that village that you picked us up at? Because that was a fucking crazy ass village. Like we don't have that kind of ammo to start engaging these dudes again. And so they agreed to escort us past that village, which leads us to day 3. Are escorting us, and they're in the lead, and we start coming up to the same village, the village of Chambaran. And their BMPs immediately start getting engaged. And we're coming from the south. If you look at my red arrow, we're coming from the north, driving south. And their BMPs get online. These blue dots simulating the BMPs. And I remember them all being online like that. And I remember them dumping everything they had into this village. And if you can see the red arrows, that simulates us on the backside of them just trying to get around the BMPs. And I remember that village dumping everything back. I couldn't believe how hard they were fighting, considering how many motherfuckers we killed the day before and everything that had happened. I think that may have been some kind of training camp, or it was definitely a Taliban stronghold for them to have that many guys fighting the first day and for that many to get killed. And then the second day, they're taking on these freaking BMPs. And I remember it seemed like we were driving really fucking slow in my mind. I was like, why are we taking so long, man, to get around these guys? Like, we just wanted to get out of there. And I remember the Taliban figured out that we were trying to get behind them, so they send a team to the south and they start launching machine gun fire and RPGs at our convoy. I remember that because I remember hearing, I think it was Sergeant Doty coming over the radio saying, these fucking RPGs keep getting them closer and closer. I also remember one of the turret gunners, I think it was Butler, was saying that he could see people coming in from the back. So they had reinforcements coming. And I remember that was another time where I remember thinking, holy fuck, man, like these BMPs are dumping all of this shit into the village. And our 50 cals and Mark 19s couldn't penetrate these Kalat walls. And these BMPs were punching holes through Kalat walls like this, if I remember correctly. And I think they were pretty equivalent to our Bradleys. I think they had a 25 or a 30 millimeter cannon on it, and then it had like 2 rockets or something on the side. And I remember thinking, man, dude, these motherfuckers are badass. Once we got past all that firing and everything, I remember we got all the way down south to where that original mountain ridge was, and we made that hard left. And I remember it was just dead quiet. Eerie. eerily quiet. And it was just like I was waiting for the next ambush. And next thing I know, Tommy Kun flies right over our head. Like literally, they were really fucking low, and they always flew really low. I'm talking rooftop level, maybe lower. And they were buzzing our vehicles, and I already had like three. I had like 3 or 4 frequencies that I would use, and one of them always works. But none of my frequencies were working, and Lieutenant Harrell was calling around, and then he handed me like 3 more frequencies, and I was punching in all those frequencies, trying each one, and then we had them for like maybe 25, 30 minutes, I think, they were buzzing the vehicle. And that whole time, I'm constantly punching in a new frequency, trying that frequency to get a hold of them. And we couldn't get a hold of them, and they ended up leaving. And then I remember us coming to this next village, that one Bade, I think it was, where we had set up in the hills to overwatch. So we come up to that village, and there's an IED. And that was kind of funny because we called in EOD, took forever to get there, and these dudes show up, and they blow the IED first, but it doesn't hit the IED. Right? So they send in this little robot. The robot inspects it, and it's like, nah, I didn't fucking hit it, so we're going to have to hit it again. So they set more C4 up on there again, and they pull the little robot back, and then they were like, all right, everybody pull back, we're going to blow this thing. And one of our vehicles, I don't remember who it was, rolled right over top of their little robot, man. I could see it coming out. I saw it coming, I think, first, and I'm like running, trying to get their attention. Stop! And they just rolled right over top of this little robot and fucking squashed it. And then they ended up detonating the IED. I remember it was a pretty big IED because they had blown a lot of IEDs in the past, but that one really, I could feel the pressure and the impact. Like when it blew up, like that motherfucker was huge. If one of our vehicles had hit that IED, we'd got fucked up, that's for sure. But we ended up making it back to the super fob with no incidents. I don't remember if we stayed there and then drove the next day. I think that's what we did. But anyway, so that's almost everything that I remember of Giro. Now there's that first day that we can talk about, but we can talk about that on another one because that one's fucking juicy as well. And there's also some crazy things that I don't think anybody knows that I think people might want to hear. But if you guys like this video, maybe we can make some more. I've just kind of felt like we're trying to stay in contact as much as we can. I know ever since 2011 and we got back from that deployment, guys start dropping like flies from the company, just whether they're suicide, drugs in jail, you know, just losing touch with reality. It's crazy. And I feel like if maybe we make these videos, I've asked a few people already, Co and Bennett Bobo, and both of them seem to be really like excited about it. So if you guys are interested, I would love to make this first video about Giro.